Welcome back to Dan91's garage. So last week the video ended where we'd finished sorting out all the little problems we could find on the car, basically without buying any parts, just as the car had sort of arrived in my garage. So now it's time to address the biggest problem we can see, which is the rust. So no point messing about, let's just dive straight into it, where you'll find me on the floor scrabbling around next to a sill. Well, that's escalated quickly. So we've gone from it being a little bit rusty and might need a bit of a tidy up and a clean here to, there's no sill left. So I don't think it's too bad. The inside of it actually looks pretty reasonable and the rest of it's pretty solid. This is going to need some ink as well, I think. But either way, it's not as bad as it could have been. I've cut out all the rot now. So this one's a bit of a wacky shaped panel down here. It's not exactly the easiest one. I could just bring this across and chop it down or something. But anyway, it's as cut as it needs to be. So now I'm just cleaning off all the metal around it. So obviously the last thing you want is paint and stuff there, so it won't weld properly or it'll catch fire. So you just need to tidy that up a bit basically. But yeah, not doing too badly. I've seen worse, I've seen a lot worse. I've seen a lot worse with an MOT when I was going and looking at cars, which was quite tragic. But the good news is the difficult stuff to replace on the inside's pretty good. There's not a spot of rust on this, which is lovely. And the rest of the sills on both sides are pretty good. So I was at the point thinking to myself, well, if it's only just a little bit of surface, I'll just paint it and everything. But as I started grinding away, just more and more of it fell out, and I got to the point where it was sort of two big holes and a sort of lacy patch of rust in the middle. I thought, well, I can't just nosh that together with P38. That's an animal move. So yeah, gonna patch it. So get myself some sheets of steel, sort the rest of this stuff out. Being as it's a cheap car, I mean, I'm not going to spend days making metal templates to fit in here exactly and butt weld it. I am going to just put a sort of slag patch on the outside of it. So make something slightly bigger than all of this, wrap it round and then just buzz it round on the outside. If it was a car that was, you know, in generally better condition everywhere, then of course I would be doing the proper way of doing it and butt welding it, actually buying a replacement sill and cutting sections out. But this really isn't too complex of a shape. We're just going to go down and round. I'll probably pull this and flatten this out so the back edge of it's a bit easier to weld. Yeah, and we'll give that a go. Not really a bodywork guy, but as you're about to find out probably. But yeah, it's a part as it needs to be. Bit of a tidy up, make some templates and stuff. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at with our 5-minute rebuild. So yeah, bear with me. So the steel's arrived, so I can make the repair patches for the sill. These are obviously the templates I made out of cardboard, always helps. So need to add on a little tab here so I can fold that up to go into the sort of wheel arch, the end of the wheel arch on it. But yeah, it's 1mm steel, CR4 material, mild steel, not galvanized. I know galvanized obviously is higher corrosion resistance, but I don't like welding galv because it gives off poisonous fumes and gases and all sorts of horrible stuff that will make you very ill and or worse. So yeah, just going to trace these out, and yeah, again the car measured up with the digital vernier at 1mm. Sometimes you end up at 0.8mm of a panel, but it was definitely 1mm, so welding 1mm to 1mm should be better. Okay, so we're getting somewhere. I've got my template strip, so obviously it needs to be formed up, but it's cut to about the right size. Fold him a little tab up at the back, so he's going to go across the back there, and that fills in where there used to be steel in this area that all rusted away. I've rolled up, got a piece of scrap steel, just rolled that around a socket, and that gives me basically the right curve, the correct radius to match up with the part of the sill we've got there. The thing is though, obviously we need to find out where the straights are, so basically it comes down from the top here and it's basically straight till about this point, and then from the bottom up is straight to about that point. So there's actually quite a small curve in this. There's not actually a huge amount of sort of arc length there, so you don't want to overbend the metal. So basically I've made myself up a little strip that I just rolled around a socket, and that I know is now the right radius. So I know I've got the right curve for when I actually bend it, but I've got to put the bend in the right place on the blank. So using my cardboard template again, I've transferred the straight onto this as one mark, which came out right by the white diagonal there. And then that's the actual curve down to that point as well. So that's where the bottom flat is. So yeah, transfer this for the start and end of the bend on here so I know I'm roughly in the right place. The good thing about 1mm is it's fairly easy to form, so it's going to be a bit more of a challenge with that there now, but thankfully that isn't where the bend is too much. So yeah, it's going to be fun whatever happens, and the back end of it doesn't have to be the same curve as the front. In fact, the back end of it is a much bigger rad than the front anyway, so it should be like more of a cone shape, but there's no one going to be able to do that, so I'm going to get it to follow this curve. And yeah, I mean, judging by how that looked, it looked pretty good in there. So yeah, we're going to put that in there and then fill in the end, probably make a little sort of like hockey stick shape thing and possibly tack that in there. I just really want to get this scary open bit done, and then we'll see what's left of this metal that's good enough to weld to. But yeah, so that's the easy one done apparently. So yeah, it just slips in there pretty well. Shouldn't be too bad, should be able to butt weld all that. There is a tiny little bit of a step, but it doesn't have to be perfect. As long as it welds together, should be fine. So yeah, position that, couple of tacks, magnets, a few bits and pieces, and yeah. This is going to be the fun one. So yeah, I've got the big patch cut out now, so I'll go and start bending that up, I guess. Hopefully it goes as easy as this one does. So there it is, second one's all made up. It's not particularly easy because I think this has been sort of driven over a curb and there was a bit of a dent here, which is what I think caused all this rust in the first place. So this area doesn't really conform to the other end of it. So that's sort of like more of a 2 straights and a curve, whereas it's more sort of like 3 straights with 2 tiny radiuses on it. But either way, I've got a curve at the back and more of a sort of straightened out angles at the front. Yeah, so marked it up so I know where it goes. That goes on there. By the time you push that up and sort of squeeze the floor back in, because the problem is the lower part of this kind of flops around everywhere, so you end up chasing your tail a bit, sort of straightening the back out, and then the front don't fit, then the front don't fit, then the back does fit. But if you put it on there and sort of jam it on there really hard, I've managed to get it to the point now where it's all ready to weld. So yeah, happy with that. Going to give it some weld through copper on the back just to protect it a little bit. Hopefully it won't catch fire while I'm welding it, fingers crossed. But yeah, there you go. It wasn't fun, but I'm glad I did it, and it wasn't bad for me first try at it either, so I haven't actually scrapped any of it yet, so that's cool. But yeah, tack that on in a few corners, then sort of push it in with a hammer while you're making sure that it's pressed in all the places, and just essentially all I'm going to do is tack round it, lots of little tacks, sort of overlapping tacks, moving around the panel, trying to keep the heat out of it. So these are the tools I use to make the patch panels. So yeah, rolled it over this piece of 2.5 inch exhaust pipe to make the larger radius, sort of full length curves in it, and also use the jack handle for the tighter radius curves. Obviously you need the thing to be longer than the piece of metal to get it in there. Yeah, and even wrapped it over the top of the hammer once or twice just to help sort of roll it and knead it in, just to help straighten stuff out when you're sort of bashing it around. The problem is you sort of end up straightening up one end and it fits perfect, then the other end's off, so you straighten up the other end, make that fit perfect, and then put a few bends in it, and then you come back to this end again, and you kind of end up chasing your tail. But yeah, that's all that stuff really. All done with hand tools, which I didn't think was too bad. So yeah, cardboard templates coming good. Anyway, I'll get some copper weld through primer on the back of them, just to stop it being bare metal. The outside I'm going to leave best I can, and on the edges I'm going to leave those as well so it welds a bit easier. This is my test weld sample, so just to get the settings right. So started off, obviously this is a butt joint and this is a lap joint. So the lap joint is where the two overlap each other, that's why it's called a lap joint, and the butt joint is where they butt up against each other. So started off with these settings. This is basically, like I say, 3 on the voltage and 5 on the wire speed, which might not mean much to some, but what you're looking for is sort of some sort of penetration through the back. So I was able to penetrate through, and don't forget, I'm only doing a chain of spot welds. So this setting would be far too hot to actually try and run a bead to weld 1mm together. The only reason you use higher settings or more powerful settings is because you're only hitting it with a spot for maybe half a second or 1 second, then stopping. So you don't have the luxury of heating up a nice molten pool of steel and then pushing and penetrating into the steel whilst moving along with the same heat. So you have to basically overpower the weld to get get through and do enough penetration for the short amount of time and the small amount of heat that it's putting in. Otherwise you'll overheat the panel and warp it, or just blast your way through, because obviously the settings are too high. So fiddled around with those. Basically the lap joint is obviously slightly higher power and about the same wire feed. So yeah, I think this was about 3.2, but like I say, this was slightly higher power but but the same wire speed, should I say, and that managed to get some penetration on the back as well. And that is literally zapping it in and hitting a panel head on, rather than essentially welding up the edges of two panels, which is always easier to burn through. So that's my test piece to get my settings, which didn't come out too badly. There we go, all welded on. So started off with the back patch, because that was the smallest one and a bit easier. That was a butt weld, so I used 0.6mm wire, and the settings on my machine are 3 for the volts and 5 for the wire speed. So it's about 18 volts, and yeah, don't know what the wire speed is, but mine only goes up to 10, so halfway. So yeah, it's pretty easy doing this, just a few spots here and there. And then obviously start filling in the gaps, let it cool down a lot. You can blow it with air to cool it down if you needed to, but never really got particularly hot. So it's not the prettiest thing in the world, but at the end of the day, it's just a series of spot welds all bunched together. The hardest part was doing the stuff underneath. There's obviously a seam that runs right underneath both of these. This one's not so bad because it was in the corner and I can pretty much get down on it, but this one was an absolute nightmare. I was basically sort of doing it by feel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dress back the visible parts of the weld. The stuff underneath I'm not going to worry about. I'm just going to cover that in a quick rub of seam sealer just to fill in, because again, this has all got this sort of special textured seam sealery junk on it. So I'm just going to fill back in the seam sealer underneath. Once this has been knocked back, I can then paint this as well. So there we are, there's it all ground back. Took this down with a flat disc and an angle grinder to the same level as the new material. I was never going to be able to get in here, and when you put the flat disc in there, there's a real danger that you start grinding away, you'll just end up eating through the good material that's left and weakening it. So took that back to here, and also the same here, because this is a butt weld, it's a bit easier to take off. And in the end there, that's a little hockey stick thing I made just to replace the material that essentially fell out when I undid the bolt. There's like this rubber cover here, which is supposed to stop junk getting in, but all it does is let junk in the top and then collect it and keep it in there for you forever. And then as I was undoing the bolt here to undo it, it just tore the plastic nut mounting thing through the rust, and there was nothing left essentially afterwards. So there we go. Right in my mouth. Not delicious. Ooh. Yeah, that's the big problem there. Ow. Ow. That was straight in the chops again. Quality. Yes. It's about as structurally sound as a croissant, that is, so yeah. Yeah, time to get the big tools out. Okay, so I got updates. Whoever the genius was that decided to fix this is a bit worse than it looked. This whole area must be solid filler, because I've twiddled my screwdriver into it and it sticks in about sort of 6mm, and we should have hit metal by now. And if you look in here, you can see what can only be described as chicken wire, or perhaps a bird feeder has been shoved in there to act as backing for what I can only assume is a giant clod of filler here. And it must be a pretty big size, because otherwise how the hell did they get the chicken wire in there? I'm going to carry on with this horror show, and I'll I'll see you guys when we're ready to start welding stuff in or making panels, I guess. Okay, so we're deep into sill number 2 now. As suspected, there was a whole bunch of chicken wire folded up and a giant clod of filler rammed in there to cover up the rust hole. Chopped out fairly large chunk of the sill. You could see there was some bubbling on the outside and stuff, and this just went straight through with my finger, but yeah, you can see on the back of it there's some pretty serious rust basically all the way up to the top. This corner here could have been saved on a bit more, but at the end of the day there's rust on the outside that I wanted to cut off anyway, so you see the rust on the outside that I wanted to get rid of, so it wasn't just that. But yeah, not a bad guess. It's pretty solid now. I've cut all of the crap out from this outer panel that is now back to basically solid metal. I'm not too sold on the shape yet. It might need a little bit more. We've had to go under here as well and chop out like a square section, so I'm not entirely sure of the shape it's going to be yet. This all looks a bit bubbly, but to be honest, it's not that bad. I've chopped the corner off of this because it was all crusty. I don't want to get the worst out of it. The rest of it just seems to be surface and a few sort of like crusty bubbles, so there we are. All of this has fallen off. I've already hoovered about the same amount up once of mainly mud and rust from inside the wheel arch where that sort of rubber cover goes round, which basically causes most of this trouble in the first place. So yeah, like I say, I've got to get all this cavity wax or whatever it is. First of all, I thought it was sort of like body filler without any hardener in, and they just like messed it up. But yeah, I want to get as much of that out as I can because you know, it's a bit of a fire hazard when you're welding, so that'll be fun. But yeah, the rest of it don't feel too bad in there. That's the ridiculous thing. It was horrific in this corner, but then everything else seems absolutely fine. So there we go. But you know, most Japanese cars of this age have got this or worse. Anyway, I'm going to carry on with this nonsense and then start bashing some metal about, I guess. And this is the weld-through primer I was using. It's from U-Pol, and it's a copper weld-through primer. So, and obviously this is corrosive because it's an acid etch primer. But yeah, like I say, degrease, sand, shake the can, and it basically dries in about 10 or 20 minutes. So that's actually really quick. So you can just get on with your day. So I've first can of this I've used zinc stuff in the past, but this seems to be doing quite well at the moment. But yeah, just sort of some general preparations for welding that I do. Obviously I've disconnected the battery, the positive and the negative, put the caps back on it so nothing can reattach itself while I'm not looking. Also fire extinguisher, bought myself a brand new fire extinguisher and always have at least one or two. I've got another one over there that I use just in case. So we have painted and we've dried, and the first piece is obviously going to weld in here. This piece was quite rusty, like I say, and that's now basically been removed because it had more holes in than Swiss cheese. So the first piece I need to put in is the curved piece that goes here, because then that gives me the shape to build everything else from. And then once I've got that curved piece in, I need the bottom piece in as well to make sure I know where the side is going to and wrapping round. So those are the two bits I want to get done in this session. So we're back to some sort of original shape. Obviously I replaced this piece as the first sort of patch repair that I did. Unfortunately, as I was welding down here, it just started to eat away at this panel here, so had to make another one. Frustratingly, this was kind of already in when I started noticing the holes were blowing through it, so then afterwards I cut this piece out and then sort of tapped another one in from the back, then welded it up that way from the front. But yeah, that would have been a lot nicer repair if I could have done it as one piece rather than having to join down the middle. But it is what it is. It looked fine while I was putting this in, but then, like I say, as soon as you touch it with a welder, it just basically vaporized it. So yeah, didn't take long to poke a few more holes in that. So yeah, that's that. And then we've got the lower piece in here, which was the other one. That's the folded up end that I welded to the original part of the sill here. So this is all totally solid now. So yeah, now we're gonna do the outer panel. I seriously doubt I'll be able to do it as one piece. It's got to have some sort of contour this way as well as a sort of change of direction across the top edge as well. So what I'll probably do is do a front strip that goes in somewhere from this angle piece down to the sort of join between these two and then the second piece will join to that. So I need to make this first. I've already got the cardboard template, so I'll go and make that out of metal. So I just wanted to have a quick chat about gas and stuff when you're welding. Obviously this is a cheapo reg, so it's a 2-gauge single stage, I think they call it. I think there's a 2-stage. Let me know in the comments. What I really wanted to talk about today was obviously on these cheaper regs that are single stage, as the bottle pressure decreases, so if we started off at 200, say, this would flow at a certain rate, and you set that with this dial. So let's say we set that to flow at 15. Then as you're welding, obviously you're using up gas, and it's, you know, it takes a while. It doesn't happen over, you know, over one session, but as the gas pressure reduces in the bottle, the flow pressure or the flow volume increases. So when I was started at 200, it was putting out, say, sort of 13 or 14, and now I'm round to here, it was actually putting out sort of 15 or 16. So it's just something to keep an eye on. Don't get paranoid about it, but all I'm saying is, as you're welding and using up pressure in the bottle, you'll have to readjust your flow rate, because it will change on these cheaper regs. So yeah, the other thing to make sure you pay attention to is sitting here at static flow, that's set at about 15. But when you actually press the torch to let the gas out, the flow rate will drop, usually by 1 or 2 litres per minute. So this is set at around the 15, but I know when I hit that, it goes down to about 14 and 14 or 13. So it's very important to set this whilst and test what's actually coming out when you're actually using the torch. So because I can't just let out gas without the wire coming out, I disconnect the feed mechanism. So when I press the torch, all it does is spray some gas out and the motor spins, and it doesn't really do anything apart from show me the true flow. So there we go. That's just a few tips there on setting up some stuff for gas welding. So moving on, this is the next piece we're going to weld in. It's the front half. This is the front piece I made, and it goes in there. So we'll get that all set up, zap that one in. That's the last piece made. It's the outer sill right by the wheel arch. So yeah, it wasn't fun to make. It's got this weird foldy corner where sort of 3 other patch panels seem to meet up. Tight corner at the front, more open radius at the back. Not too happy with that fold line in it, but I'm not going to bash it around now because it sort of seems to roughly fit, and the top of it is sort of a bit of a dog leg as well, where the panel sort of changes angle 2 or 3 times right in the corner by the door. Yeah, so nothing a bit of body filler can't cover up, and because it's managed to get it as a butt weld as well, so that's it's a bit harder to actually make it fit, because you obviously have to get all of the edges to line up. The bottom one thankfully is quite close for this section, and this piece there's a bit of a gap, but again I should be able to fill that anyway. So yeah, happy with that. Just going to paint some copper weld through on the inside, because we'll never see that face again. Yeah, then we should be ready to tack it on, and the outside of the sill will be closed up. Now it's all welded in, just got to dress back the weld. I'm quite happy with the way it's come out, considering I've made these pieces myself out of a flat sheet of steel. Cardboard templates always help, and like I say, that gives you your basics, and then formed with hand tools. I'm very happy with the way that's come out. So yeah. Okay, so we're ready to start painting. This is the sort of process we've got to go through. So we've got etch primer here, which is first going to go on the bare metal, and in my case filler that's on the sill. Then when that's dry, I'm going to use this, which is seam sealer, underneath anything underneath the sill that you can't see, just to cover up the welds, just to make sure there's no leakage there. I know the welds around the top are good because they were easy to weld, and I've ground them back and I can see there's no gaps, but this is just in case there's a few gaps or anything underneath the sill, and you'll never see that anyway. When that's dry, I've got this stone protector, stone chip stuff. So you spray that on, and it's a textured finish, fairly similar to the original, so it won't look quite so goofy, with like a nice shiny smooth patch compared to the bit next to it that's a textured stone chip finish. Then when that's dry, grey primer, and then after that we've got some 1C0 paint. This is Toyota sort of specified stuff, although I did buy Millennium Silver Lexus 1CO, I was sent this and they've assured me it's the same. So all of that stuff's going on. Currently I'm on the second coat, just about to start, of the stone protector stuff. So you can see it's got sort of a bit of a textured finish to it, and this is just flashing off now. See, it seems to be dissolving the crappy masking tape we got going on, so going to give that another quick swaz of that just to cover it up. But yeah, there's a bit of a textured finish here going on, which helps try and make it look a little bit more like the original finish there. So I'm going to carry on with this. You don't need to watch me spray paint stuff or to watch paint dry, so when this is all done, you'll get to see the final result. And just when I thought we were done with all the welding, I started to look at the brakes. Obviously the rear brakes needed some attention. So yeah, jacked it up, axle stands, took the wheel off and had a quick look, and there was already a hole inside the very corner of the end of the sill, which I couldn't see. So more welding it is. And as always, what looks like a minor little patch of rust turns out to be basically the arse end of the sill. This is a really crappy sort of design. You've essentially got sort of at least 4 panels all meeting in one place, none of which are fully welded together, and then basically you just get these giant chunks of seam sealer. This actually came out from sort of inside the bottom here, and that's all that essentially stops the water getting in and up in the rails. Thankfully, this section here is pretty solid. This is obviously completely disappeared now. A little bit more up the inside, so I'm basically going to cut around this line here and see what we've got left. Well, we're back with some updates. So I've chopped out all the rusty metal. There's a little bit of surface here and there that I'm not too worried about, but this lower section wasn't as solid as I thought, and I sort of started squeezing it with a pair of pliers and some of it crumbled out, so I've cut it back to good metal. There's the piece. And it's definitely good metal where I am, and it was starting to crumble and fall apart on this area. So that's the first piece. Gonna be a little sort of L-shapey thing. It is double skin, as you can see, outer sill and inner sill, but we're just going to put a single piece in there and tack it and weld it in. That'll be fine. Then yeah, going to cover this up with some sort of triangle. I'm not going to bother making patches that butt weld in. I'm just going to overlap it with a lap joint, because then I don't have to be quite so accurate and spend hours making this patch. I can just make an oversized template, slap it on there and spot it, and then push it in place and tack it on, and it'll be fine. So that's the easy stuff. Then we come into this interesting piece in here. I've had to chop out all of that stuff. Epoxy line in the right place. So yeah, there we go. That's about where we're up to. It's not horrific though. And like I say, I think 3 patches, one at the bottom, triangle piece there, and then whatever we've got left will be this thing, which has got to be quite an interesting shape, because we're going to end up having to make a sort of L shape out of it. It's got to have a piece that comes along this face, sort of on the inside of here, and then goes up across here. So it's going to have a fold of some kind on it, but I think I'll know more once I've got all of these other bits in. So finish welding up the arch. So yeah, triangle panel for that, L-shaped one in there, little curved one at the bottom, and this weird sort of triangle thing that kind of folds up round the back of the arch itself. And I've sort of tack welded it all the way down between the 2 panels, sort of pinched it together and then ground it back, so it kind of looks vaguely like it should be there. But like I say, it's nowhere near what it used to be like in this area, but there wasn't a huge amount I can do once I'd got these 3 panels in. The only thing I could do left was this little triangle thing here. So yeah, that's all up in there. It's all solid. There's no holes or anything, so it's just going to get seam sealed around the outside after it's been primed with some acid etch, I think. So there we go, all painted up. So yeah, not too bad a match on the colour. It's always difficult to get metallic paints to match. The thing is as well, with any paint matching you do, it can quite often be influenced by how dark the primer was as well. So yeah, it's not done too bad. And don't forget, I mean, the rest of the car paint's been faded for 20 years. So this may be the original colour it came out of the factory, but the rest of the car has obviously been weathered over the past sort of 2 decades. But yeah, a bit annoyed I didn't quite sand out this hard line I had from taping off. It's not the end of the world, but it's still visible. But yeah, this side isn't too bad. And the inner arches at the rear, we've gone with the stone chip paint, which actually matches in quite nicely with this. So yeah, that's all sorted this side. Again, a little bit of a tape off mark there, that's a bit frustrating, but if you stand back here and have a quick look at it, you wouldn't really notice a huge amount of difference in colour with the paint. So we're going to go with that. Just pop around the other side. And as we can see down here, this side sort of come out a bit better. Again, it was a bit shorter, this side, but yeah, pretty decent colour match. Nice and smooth. And if we can compare that to the giant clod of filler that was in here, originally the frustrating thing is the filler that was in there, the guy hadn't even sanded it. It was literally just slapped on, smoothed across the best you can, had all the ripples and all the sort of like bubbling in it, and then you sprayed any old silver over the top of it. So now structurally sound on all the three big problems that we had, more the fourth one in the arch as well that turned up at the end. Yeah, all painted up good. So now the car is basically complete as far as bodywork goes. You can see how filthy it's got in the process. This is the problem you have when you end up doing sanding, grinding, and God knows what in the same place that you actually build your cars. So ideally I would build a workshop sort of outside next to the garage so that all of the dirty work could be done there, and this would just be for assembly. But that's definitely not going to be happening in this episode. So anyway, that's about where we're at. The next episode should be either brakes or a whole bunch of servicing stuff. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe, because like I said, that's what keeps me going on this one. And I'll see you on the next episode. Take care of yourselves.